basically what it allows you to do is quickly create line of business applications without writing any code. So you can connect to different data sources. With Access Web Apps, basically you're using your basically SharePoint or Azure in the back end. With PowerApps, you can actually connect to many different data sources. There's a complementary technology called Power BI. With Power BI, you create visuals, and with that, you can connect to more than 60 different databases behind the scenes, or spreadsheets, or other kinds of data. I think that we're going to see PowerApps move to that model. There are several that you can connect to today with PowerApps, but I believe that it's moving in the direction where we'll be able to connect to different pieces of that. Unlike Access Web Apps, with PowerApps, it's really designed for the mobile first environment. And what I mean by that is it's focused on being able to run on your iPhone, your Android phone, the iPad, and with Access Web Apps, obviously that runs within a browser, and if you're using an app with Access Web Apps, I find myself scrolling back and forth if I'm trying to use a web browser on the phone. It's really not practical. I do have a client that actually uses Access Desktop. It's a company that's a wedding chapel out in near Detroit, and she has an iPhone, and she actually uses Join.me to connect to her Access Desktop database that I created for her 3 or 4 years ago, and she is a master with the iPhone of moving back and forth and scrolling. She can I can't believe how quickly she moves around with that, but I think for a lot of people that would be very, very difficult to do. So with PowerApps, it actually changes to fit whatever screen environment you're in. So you'll see your button controls and those kind of things move around. Whereas with an Access Web App, it's very static. You're kind of stuck with that. So it's designed great on screen sizes as well as tablets and larger devices. The other cool thing is that it runs natively on your iPhone and iPad and Android phones. And basically what that means is that when you, if any of you design mobile apps for the iPhone, some people use different packages. I've experimented with my mind just went blank. There's a company out in Massachusetts. Gosh, what's the name of it? It also begins with an A. I can't think of it. Alpha Software. And so I've played a little bit with Alpha. The one issue that I don't like about developing in those kind of environments is when you develop your app, you still have to submit it to the Apple team or the Android team and get it approved. The neat thing about a Power App is that you don't have that conditioning. So what they've done is they've basically built an app that is approved by the Apple Store, and then you can run any Power App, any application you created under that window. Think of Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel doesn't care if you have information on a recipe list or a contact list or your budget or your sales figures. Excel doesn't care what the information is inside of Excel. It just shows that whatever data that you want to inside of Excel. Think of Power App that same way. With Power App, once you've installed Power Apps on your phone, you can run any of the apps inside of it that you've created for it. So that's one of the neat things about running natively on the different devices. Something else that I like about Power Apps, and I've kind of mention this, but you've got the ability to have multiple data connections at one time. So with Access Web Apps, you design your database, and that data resides inside of basically the SharePoint world, or SharePoint on premises as well, but it's inside of SharePoint, and you can only link to that one database. With PowerApps, you've got the ability to have multiple data connections. So you can add the ability to connect to your CRM. Let's say you use Salesforce, or you can connect to maybe a SQL Azure database that you have. You can connect to an Excel database, Excel spreadsheet that's inside of OneDrive. So you've got the ability to have data from different sources all in one spot, and you can connect to those. Sorry, hold on just a second. And Charles, I'm glad you said that. I am not recording, so I will. I'll start recording now, and maybe I'll re-record the beginning again. But this is, we're talking about PowerApps today. We're talking a little bit about the differences between PowerApps and Access Web Apps. And we were just mentioning that with an Access Web App, you're connected to basically SQL Azure on the back end. Whereas with PowerApps, you've got the ability to connect to multiple resources at data connections at one time. One of the other features, and this is similar to Access Web Apps, is where there's no code. You don't write any kind of VBA code in either Access Web Apps or in PowerApps. Within Access Web Apps, though, you have the ability to write macros and data macros. One of the issues with PowerApps is you don't have the capability of writing those macros, and you can't write data macros inside of PowerApps, but you can do things like formulas, and eventually, we'll have the ability to add Microsoft Flow, which is, I'm not going to get it too far into that, but it's kind of like, think of InfoPath, kind of following, if a trigger happens, something will happen. Like if somebody adds a record to a table, you'll be notified through email, things like that. That's what Flow is. But I look at it as, if you think PowerPoint meets Excel, so it's got the layout and the use of creating screens similar to PowerPoint, but you've got the ability to add formulas inside of the Power App to be able to handle any of those kind of any of those kind of situations. I guess the other thing I want to mention before I dive into the demo is security. When working with Access Web Apps, your security is given through SharePoint. So you have the ability of allowing a person to be an owner, or basically an admin person of the app. You've got the ability to have them just read-only rights and different kind of rights such as that. And within PowerApps, it inherits whatever security that the data model is pulling from. So if you're connected to a SQL Azure database, whatever rights that you've defined within SQL Azure pass along to PowerApps. If you've designed something in Dynamics, then whatever that security that was defined there pass along to PowerApps, and that makes it easier for IT departments to better manage that security instead of having its own environment inside of SharePoint. And I want to say kind of a caveat. I'm still programming things in Access Web Apps. I'm not by any means, going away from Access Web Apps. I've got several clients that are using Access Web Apps. I think I've mentioned the World Wildlife Fund in the past that I developed a database for them that uses Access Web Apps. I think it'll continue to be a good product for well into the future. But this is again just something else that they're creating. So I just want to kind of go through, if you can see this screen, apps that mean business. To get to PowerApps, you can just go to PowerApps.com, or you can go to PowerApps.Microsoft.com, and you can go in and you can sign up for free. And I would encourage everyone to do that. Again, you need to have a domain. It needs to be a company email address. It can't be something like CompuServe, or I think I'm dating myself, or AOL, or any of those kind of things. And so within here, you can see you can connect to the things that you already have. So you can connect to data that you already have, whether it's SQL, Azure, whether it's like I said, Dynamics, things like that. You build the apps without writing code, and basically what you're doing is if you if you add basically a table or an entity into your Power App, it'll automatically build 3 screens for you. The first screen is a navigation menu, which is kind of like if you want to see, you've got all of your clients that you can see at one time. The second one is a single view form, which allows you to view like a particular customer, a particular customer's data, and then it will create also an edit view form, which allows you to edit the data within that customer. And so that's how you do it. You can publish it for use on web and mobile. And I see some questions popping up into the box here, so let me take a look. Jack, yes, they're adding Flow to Power Apps. Formulas that sound similar to SQL Server reporting services. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but it's almost, I equate it to like Excel formulas in, but you're referencing kind of the sheet and then cells within that sheet. With Power Apps, you're referencing a field and then a property within that field, or a table and then a field within that table, that kind of stuff. Julian added, they work a bit like Excel macros, always calculated, for example, no need to trigger an event to update things. That's correct. Yeah, so with an Access Web App, if you want to look up a particular record and make a change to that record, you have to create a data macro, and then within that data macro, basically you find that record, or you basically loop through and find all the records that meet a certain criteria in order to update that using a data macro. Editor is also like an Excel formula box, so quite difficult to build complex formula. That's correct. So it is, yeah. So Excel, it is more in-depth Excel formulas than we're used to, but it does have a builder function similar to Excel that auto completes things. But it is a little bit of something that will take a little bit of time to get used to. On this screen, they say innovation just got easier. If you'll notice on the left, this is a GIF that continues just to kind of circle. But I'll just show you. There's 3 parts to it, and I mentioned this. So you've got this first part, which is selecting like a customer from a list. And of course, I should, of course it's looping through now, but you select customer, then you can view a particular item, and then you can edit those items. That's what it's showing, so you can edit that information. Okay, so they do have pre-built templates. You can start.
Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry, we don't see your screen. We see the PowerApps.microsoft.com.
Yes, that's where I'm at. Yeah, that's what I'm. That's what I'm talking about.
Demoing a page. Okay.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just kind of going through what's on this page so people can kind of understand where this is, and then I'll jump in and actually show you my iPhone and how it looks, that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
So good, but I appreciate you stopping me because I have had cases in the past, and I know one time Juan and I were giving a presentation, and he was, and I've been like a minute into the conversation, and I'm like, whoops, I'm not showing you the right screen. So I appreciate that, Tom. Yeah, so you do have built-in templates. You have the ability to connect to Excel files, SharePoint lists, CRM records, as well as custom APIs. That's how you can do some coding inside of there. There is a visual designer, and the designer, there is a web-based version of the designer, and there's a PC-based version of the designer. On the system that I'm on right now, this is a Windows 7. I did not upgrade this machine to Windows 8 or 10, and so Windows 7 will not run the desktop-based version of the software, so I have to use the web version in order to do it. But the cool thing again is you can add things like cameras, GPS, pen control, and those are things that Access Web Apps didn't provide you to do, so you can do a lot of those kind of things with it. And I've mentioned this before, you can connect to what you already have, so there's a lot of different things that you can connect to, and like I said, as this grows, I think you're going to see the same data sources that you find in Power BI to be inside of Power Apps. And again, you'll have the ability, kind of just like Power BI, you've got the ability to pull data from multiple data sources, and and then work with that data. Now I'm gonna take a sideline for a second. I want to kind of explain something that they're doing, which I thought at first it was kind of a strange thing to do, and I was a little annoyed by it, but now I better understand what they're doing. And so basically what they have is they've got something called a CDM, which is basically means it's a common data model. And what that common data model allows you to do there, it has a lot of, actually, here, let me do this. Hold on a second. I'm just going to pop open this. And so they have this thing, it's called a common data model. And what it is it's pre-created tables that would be used by different types of organizations. So a lot of these I probably would not.
Excuse me, are we supposed to be seeing something?
Yeah, can you see the Power Apps tab?
No, just apps that mean business purple screen.
And so they have this common data model, and what you see here are some of the things that they have that are standard, things like customer and donor and different things like that. And you can use those standard items, or you can create your own entities as well. The interesting thing about the common data model is one of the ways that they they discuss it working is within Microsoft. They have this program where every year, if people go in and get, and I think it's like an initial checkup, if they do that every year, they get some kind of an award. That award might be a mug, a coffee mug, or it could be where Microsoft donates $50 to the United Way or some other charity. But in that application, you don't want to have all of the HR information of all the employees where everybody can see all that data. You certainly don't want all those health records of everybody to be shown to everybody as well. And so what this common data model allows you to do is you can create what we call a syncing and staging, where it will take only the data that the people responsible for that database allow, and it will push that into kind of a filtered data set of only maybe, let's say, employee ID and the date of the last checkup. And so it filters everything down. Because you don't want all the data from the health agency. You don't want their entire SQL database being pulled down. You just need a couple pieces of information, and so you can set. They call that an ODS, which basically is a read-only data store. I think it's like operational data store. I think that it's read-only, and it only has bits and pieces of information there, not the entire database. And then you can set it so that it will refresh that data, once an hour, once a minute, once a day, whatever, however you want to do it. There's also a second part of the common data model, which is like a read-write function. And that would be the function. Let's say, going back to this case of Microsoft, if the employee met that checkup, they just need the ability to choose the form of gain that they got. So if they want to choose a mug, if they want to choose that $50 donation, and they can choose, where that donation is going, that would be the TP, which is the transaction. That's the read-write functionality that's stored in the common data model as well. So you've got and again, you're not grabbing all of that HR data. You've just got this small piece that you're updating, and that updates the main source of data within that common data model. And so when I first heard about the common data model, I wasn't thrilled with where they were going, but I completely understand that, because it's kind of like having a database light version, because a lot of times you're working with a database, you don't need to see all the data from 10 years back. You only may want to see what happened in the last 3 months, and even within those 3 months, you only may want to see certain kinds of records. So it gives you the ability to kind of pick and choose what that information is. All right, so what I want to do, I'm going to show. Hopefully this will work okay. I'm going to show my phone. So this is my iPhone. I'll actually let me close out of this for a second, and I'll show. I don't need that, or that. Okay, so PowerApps is in the lower left-hand corner. You can see this purple icon, and if I click on it, it will open up it'll open up the application itself, and I've created 2 small ones at the top, and then there's a bunch here that are built that are built in that Microsoft has, budget trackers, but it shows all of them. One of the nice things that they've just added within the last couple weeks is you've got the ability now to have all of my apps or the sample apps or favorites, because in the past it would just show all the apps, and then you would have to cycle through all of them to find what you're looking for. You can also search for them and things like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and click. I'm not sure which of these is more up to date, so I'm going to click on one of these. And so this is going to open up just a really simple app. And so in here, you've got a list of some of my clients in here. And then on any of these, I can click on it. And then it will automatically show you this, the kind of the view version of it. And if I click on the little pencil, it will move me into edit mode. You know, I can click on this. I'm just gonna test whatever. And so I've got the ability to edit it. I can click on the little check mark. And then it comes back. I can go back to the main screen. If I can slide it off to the right, which will exit that Power App, and then it comes back to the main screen. And so basically, what it's again, the Power App software, you're only installing Power Apps one time on your system, and then once it's installed, you can run any of these apps inside of it. Now earlier I tried to couple these and it crashed on me. So that's the power of new apps. And while that's loading, let's check the chat window here. Good. All right, good. And so in this case, Cost Estimator wants us to use this service feature camera. I'm going to go ahead and allow it. And so now I'm in another app. This is Cost Estimator. I can click on it. I can click on Begin Estimate, you know, and you can just, and then here, within here, this is where you can put in, you know, your name and your length and things like that. Again, the thing I like is, I don't know if you, oh yeah, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but I'm circling, there's a microphone there. So I'd be able to click on the microphone and type in WorkSmart Database Masters or whatever, and automatically enter data based on voice instead of based on, you know, you having to type in everything individually. And then you've got maps that are built into it, you know, and things like that. And so all of and again, you can filter up above. You've got this little filter to show all jobs or just single jobs. And that's kind of how Power Apps works. And if I were to run this Power App on an iPad or on an Android tablet or different things like that, the screen would adapt to fit that particular list or form that you're working with. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that, come back to our connections again. And so within here, I've got 4 connections: the common data model, which is all these, and then I've got the ability to connect to my WorkSmart database, which is what that Andy App 1 was based on, is just a simple database I have there, and then I can connect to SQL Server as well. So you've got the ability to do those. All right, good. Check the chat window again. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so I talked a little bit about syncing. We talked a little bit about multiple data connections, and so let's talk about some other things. So the design experience of Power Apps, basically within here you got the ability to create a new app. I can either do it with PowerApps Studio for Windows, or I can do it PowerApps Studio for web. In this case, I don't have Windows 8 or 10 on here, so I need to create an app that way. I'm just going to create a blank app here, and I've got the ability to choose phone layout or tablet layout. We've also got app templates, and you can see that's coming soon. It's not available yet, but you can see some of the ways to connect to that data. Now, if you have an Access web app currently, this is something I was hoping to test earlier today, but I'll probably do it a little bit later in the week. But I'm thinking about, okay, what is going to be the transition between an Access web app and a Power App if you wanted to be able to have both an Access web app and a Power App access the same data. And so the first thing that you have is you've got SharePoint. So since you've got the ability to connect to SharePoint, when you create your Access web app, I'm not going to pull up Access right now and do it, but inside of an Access web app, you've got the ability to see your read-only connection or read-write connections with that data. And so you can connect directly to that data itself. So the same thing goes here. You choose SharePoint, grab that list within SharePoint from your Access web app, and it will automatically, for each table, it'll create those the list view, the single form view, and the edit view for each of those, and then you can customize that the way you want. If a customer was moving completely. Yeah, so Julian is saying, Andy, it works quite well unless the AWA is locked, which means that people can't access it. So good. Thanks, Julian. But in terms of a transition, if somebody was using an Access web app and they just, they maybe the majority of the function of the time their customers are going to be using it on a phone, and they want to transition to taking that app and moving to Power Apps, I think that the transition would basically be to open up that your Access web app, choose Customize and Access, which allows and create a desktop version of it. Once you create a desktop version, you can then convert your tables to local tables, and once those tables are local tables, then you can transition those to SharePoint lists, and then at that point you can connect Power Apps to those SharePoint lists in order to do it. If anybody on the call has tried it or has done it a different way, please make a comment in the conversation, and I'll mention that. So let's see. Judy says the layout has changed quite a bit since I made a test app connection to Access web apps, but I connect by selecting SQL. No, you can connect by selecting SQL Azure if you're connecting to the Access web app data. So you can still do that. And connections. Yeah, so in here, you can see the connections that are available. You've got Basecamp, Bitly, Blogger, Box. So that actually, since I looked at these, it's actually added a bunch more. GitHub, I'm glad they have Google Sheets. Insightly is new. They've got Instagram, MailChimp. Mandrill looks new. Yeah, they've really added a lot onto this. So you can see that there's many different ways to connect to that data. So that's really slick. I mean, just in a short period of time, they've added a lot to it. You can even run a data macro by triggering it with a flow. Flows can run stored procedures. Good. So so a flow basically is table based. So what you can do is set up a flow or a trigger where if Julian adds a record to the table, then have the system send an email to me. But I can also set it up so that if I'm the person that added the field to the record to the table, don't notify me because I already know about it. So you can set up flows to do those kinds of things. So yeah, good thing. PowerApps app not in the Windows Phone Store, but it is in the Windows Tablet Store. And are you saying that apps that are, Tom? Are you saying that they're for apps that are that other people have created and are available to download for people?
No, what I was looking for is that shell application, the PowerApps shell that you were speaking of, and so I searched for PowerApps in the Windows Phone Store and didn't find it. I also have a Windows tablet and I did find it there.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I switched over to iPhone, and so I've got an old Windows Phone I need to dig out so I can test things like this. So I
think
appreciate
Julian
that.
just commented that it's in the works for Windows Phone. It's currently only on Android and iOS.
Yeah, it could be because Access Web Apps works on Windows, and so they weren't too worried about it. They were really focused on not losing any more traction in the iPhone, iPad, Android phone, Android tablet market, and so they focused on there first. So I would imagine that that's why. Yeah, good. Judy, have it on my new Android. Just recently gave up my Windows Phone. Yeah. I think when I was at the last MVP Summit, I had a Windows Phone, and I kept bouncing back and forth between Samsung, Galaxy, and and I switched over to iPhone. My wife hates my iPhone, and she's got a Galaxy 6 or whatever. She doesn't have any the Note 1, Note 7 that burns up, and they make you far off in airplanes. But I like the iPhone. I've got the smaller set. I didn't like the bigger ones, but yeah. Soon what I need to do is, as I'm doing these presentations, is I really want to get, because I've got an iPad as well. I do have an Android tablet. So at some point I'm going to have to test these in the different formats and just see kind of how they all work. But yeah, it's pretty slick, the different connections that they have. In talking about a little bit more about the design experience, you've got the web interface or the desktop interface. Right now, you don't have to. It's all open source, basically, so you don't have to purchase Access in order to design your app. So you can do that. And again, it runs natively on iOS and Android. You don't have to seek approval. I mentioned that the rights are controlled by the same security as original data. This is an important one too. With an Access web app, if you design a form in one Access web app, you cannot copy that form to any other database. With PowerApps, now you'll have the ability to do that, because what you'll be able to do is you can create the form as part of the CDM, the Common Data Model, and it will be part of that table. And so whenever you utilize that table or entity within a different Power App, you'll be able to pull that form in as well. And the really neat thing is that if somebody, let's say you add on a new field, in the future, when you add on that field, it's going to be added to that form basically, and so it will automatically appear in your Power App that's connected to it. So that I think that's a slick thing, because I know with me I've ended up having to rewrite the same form multiple times for different things. Yeah, so so that's basically where I'm at with Power Apps. Does anybody have any comments or anything that they'd like to add? I'd be interested in hearing. It sounds like Judy has played with it a little bit. Julian's played with it a little bit. I think has anybody else in the group played with Power Apps yet? And what are I'd like to find out what your experiences are with them as well. Yeah, so Tom says he hasn't played with it yet, but he's interested. Yeah, Jack is saying everyone needs to begin playing with it. Right now, we're still kind of at that bleeding edge of technology thing where Julian and I kind of bang our heads against the wall as we hit things. But I know that within Microsoft, they are using it like crazy. I've heard that they have hundreds of internal Microsoft apps that they're building. So that it tells me that they're definitely going to be building on that. Jack said, what is that? Charles said, "Can you walk me through making one?" I can certainly try. And so let's give that a shot. I tried this earlier and it bombed on me, but we'll try it. So Maker Edit Apps with PowerApps Studio. So we'll do that. So I'm going to open it. This is the web interface. I'm going to, let me think, because I need to we'll do. Let's try the common data model first. We can do SharePoint, but I need to pull out all of my passwords for that. So let's try the common data model, and we'll just try one of these quickly. So let's choose Contact. We'll see if this will work for us building our app. Hopefully this will work without bombing. Okay. Yeah, Tom was saying I was thinking about an internal app as well, maybe request for time off. And I would need to create. I can't do that right now, Tom, but I think that's definitely something that we can do in a future session. And by the way, I've already Juan Soto is the person that put together these Access User Groups, and I've already asked him, can we create a new group for strictly Power Apps? and so and uh, basically, I guess I've now volunteered to take over that group as well. So we'll be doing those as well. I'll probably start sometime late November, early December, kind of a thing. So and again, I'm kind of anticipating that different people will do different sessions on stuff as well. Okay, so Julian is saying you can actually run an Access Web App data macro straight from a button on a PowerApps form. I would love to see that, Julian, if you were able to do that and replicate that. I'd be really interested in seeing that. Oh, and Judy just said that. Would like to see that, Julian, if you do. So cool. Yeah, that would be great. And so in this case, it shows us a contact form. On the left-hand side, there's different layouts, so we can choose a layout that shows, a person's picture, or, you can choose any of these kind of layouts. So you can choose that, and then within this, you've got these different boxes within here, and this is where you choose what is what. So you can choose, okay, what's this person's name? You can see their email address, business phone, in those. And so you've got the ability to change these. So if you wanted this to be, that's the full name, you can automatically, you can change that box to have it be that, and then you can just update those as you see fit. On the second one, again, this is the single view one where you're just seeing the content information, and then on this, and you can see these are called cards. These different forms are called cards. And then the third view they have is called, this is like their edit view. So if there's things here that you don't need, we can delete those out. You'll see that it'll automatically, I'm going to get rid of like full name, it'll automatically shrink to fit, so it gets rid of that blank space. And then you can kind of customize it. If you want to have the fields on the left side instead of down, you can go do those kind of things. But you can see that, like, here's one of the formulas for color. So it's a little bit different in how you do it, but you'll see that you've got this hint. So you've got like red value, a green value, blue value. So it does give you the kind of the formula edit, so that you can kind of figure out exactly what you're working with. It also allows you to choose other fields in there, or other labels, and so you can kind of fine tune it that way. Okay, so Julian is saying that he pulled up his sample, but it's not working. It should send an email. Tom's saying, so far I understand you can view and edit data. Is there a way to delete records? That would make it full CRUD. Yes, you can delete those records as well. It just depends on what features that you want to have in here. So you can add, you can delete, you can do all those kind of things. Good. Good, great questions. Where's the data? The data, actually maybe Julian or someone else can do this. I believe if it's live, it's stored within the Azure storage system. And then that data, if you're using the TP model, then it syncs to the appropriate data, as often as you want to. I don't believe they have this out yet, but I understand that I believe that I read in a news group that they're working on being able to make edits offline, and then once you're back within Wi-Fi or cell data, that it will then update that data accordingly. And I know that that's how Alpha does it as well. They can keep that data offline, and then they can push it when needed. The concern I had about having everything local is if you have all of the, like, if you got these huge databases, that's going to take up a ton of memory, on your phone. And I think that's one of the purposes that the common data model is only a kind of like a filtered, some call it filtered, and gosh, there's something else. There's another word for it. I can't think of it offhand. But basically, it parses all the duplicates and things like that. So it kind of cleans up that data in the CDM model. All right, Julian is commenting CDM is on SQL Azure. It's basically an abstraction of SQL, but with no business logic at the database level at the moment. And do you need to connect to a data source, or are we just borrowing space from Microsoft? I believe you need to have some kind of data source. I mean, if you're using your own custom CDM, all the data would reside there. But I believe that that's still in SQL Azure, which is in the cloud. I know that they've talked about that at some point in the future that data will be that they are going to charge you for that space. I have no idea what that cost is going to be or anything like that. Neil is saying, so any idea how long before offline data entry would sync when back online? I have no idea, Neil. I haven't heard any kind of timeline with that, but I know that the PowerApps groups are very active, and they're announcing things on a regular basis there. I just don't know whether it's going to be 2 months from now or 6 months from now or what.
I don't know that there's actually any data actually currently in it right now, is there? Isn't it just connections?
Yeah, I mean, if you create a CDM, you're basically creating that connection to that source, and which is, I believe, in SQL Azure. So everything has to be based somewhere. I don't think it's ever going to be a functionality where the data will only reside on a single phone. I believe it's always going to be stored in SQL Azure or some other data source.
Because isn't that I mean, it's like we've got link tables, and the native app is the forms and the offline data, however much data has been downloaded to it, which is what they got to figure out to really be offline. But I think the model is you're connected to your data source that you pointed in, and the Power App connection is just the pipeline that's going through. So it's kind of like a link table.
It is, but with the CDM, what they're doing is they're giving you this staging area where the data isn't directly in that SQL Azure. Let's say, for instance, the Access Web App. If you're connecting to the data in that SQL Azure place, it's not always directly connected to that. It's stored in this CDM area where it syncs back and forth with that data.
Andy?
Yeah.
I think CDM is a bit. You should think of CDM a bit more as a database, really. It's really an abstracted and simplified database on top of SQL Azure, is my understanding. There's that connectivity stuff that you've been talking about. I think they call that the Common Data Platform, and Common Data Model is part of that. Common Data Platform is what it is, the thing that can do, where you can do all the connections. I don't think that's not there yet. I don't think. So CDM's like your database but with the tables predefined, which is a bit, I think, it's a bit strange. So I just can imagine two people wanting to build similar apps, but with slightly different customizations of the client table or something. How they're going to deal with it, but it's basically a simplified database, and at the moment, it doesn't have any business logic in it, although I think that's probably going to change. I mean, I'd be stunned if it doesn't. Well, I know it's going to. It's been publicly announced it's going to at Ignite. There are actually a couple of pretty good videos from Ignite that are available online to watch about it. But at the moment, you can connect a PowerApp, though, to loads of different data sources at the same time, like you could with Access Desktop, but you're not limited to in-house stuff and things. You can link to REST services. You can link to all sorts of things.
Right. So today, if I'm connected to let's say, SQL Azure that's on the back end of an Access web app,
yep.
Am I picking and choosing what data is in the CDM, or is it everything within that table?
CDM and connecting to an Access web app are completely unrelated. If you're connecting to an Access web app, you're not using CDM. CDM is a different data source. It's kind of a built-in database to PowerApps.
Okay.
Yeah. With a built-in data structure that you can modify, but you can't delete anything from it, so you can't remove any fields or whatever. The ones that are there are fixed.
Right. I know you can't delete any fields. I believe you can add your own custom fields.
You can, yeah. So you can change the standard entities, and you can add your own entities to it, or I think they call them. Do they call them entities or objects? I get confused by each different.
I believe they call them entities.
Yeah, each different platform uses different terms, doesn't it? For the same thing. But yeah, so it's really a simplification and abstraction from SQL, is my guess. And then, as I said, at the moment, whereas with an Access web app, you can build all your business logic in data macros and table macros and God knows what.
Right.
You can't do any of that in CDM at the moment. Can't have any processes. You can't build any processes in a Power App which will manipulate data. So for example, I think somebody mentioned using in the chat. Using Power Apps to build a leave request process. I think someone said that.
Yeah, Tom or Charles, I believe.
Yeah, I mean that's all very well and good, but you haven't. If you were just going to live with the easy tools, i.e., web app. It's too late. It's Power Apps and CDM. You'd have no way to build the logic that you'd need to do it. Because to do it properly, you need to check, for example, what somebody's working pattern is, and therefore what days are work days and what aren't when they ask for their leave and all that kind of thing, which needs looking up, multiple tables and records all over the place to do the calculations. You can do that in an AWA quite easily, well, reasonably easily. But you can't You can't do that in CDM and PowerApps at the moment, and I don't think you could do it in Flow either. So at the moment, you couldn't do that kind of thing. What I see PowerApps, where I see PowerApps at the minute, is as a way of aggregating, either aggregating data for field teams and things in companies from multiple sources, and those sources don't have to be internal ones. They could be, you know, funny things like Facebook and goodness knows what. But they could, or for building relatively simple mobile add-ons, if you like, to your other apps, which could be Access Web Apps, they could be SQL Server databases, they could be Salesforce.com, they could be an Excel spreadsheet on Dropbox. But it's not the thing yet for me that I would think, okay, I'm going to build a new solution to manage my leave, and it's all going to be built in PowerApps. You wouldn't be able to do it.
Right. Yeah, I certainly think it's you know, I think it's more focused on like taking care of smaller, you know, smaller things as opposed to, you know, totally, you know, being able to do the stuff that we can do in Access Web Apps.
Yeah, I mean, you can build, you obviously, if you do use this as an extension to Access Web App, then you can run, I could show you how you run. I can't remember how I set it up, but I could show you how easy it is to trigger, if you want, if I just shared my screen for 2 seconds, to run an AWA, what's his name? Data macro.
Yeah. Here, I've turned you. You have the ability to present now.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell from this side.
I can't present a program. I'll present my screen. Anyone see that?
Here it is. It just popped up.
Yeah, okay. I have a very wide monitor, so sorry about that. So this one here has got a little button on it, right, which sends an email. The only thing is they don't seem to have arrived, so I don't know if it's the Access Web App that's not working and it hasn't sent it or what. But all you have to do is to effectively create if we look at the data sources, just the actual data macros effectively available through the data sources process, and then you've got this. That's it. You're passing it a couple of parameters. So up here you've got running a data macro called demo approval, and you're passing it a parameter of the email address field and the notes field. That's it. So that's parameter-driven data macro.
That's pretty slick. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and it did work, but of course there've been a few updates since, haven't there?
I know. That's the frustration that I'm running into too. Is I've got things and it's like, oh well, I thought that worked before, and then, you know, but again, you're dealing with the bleeding edge of technology.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to. I've tried recently to build an iPad app, and that's not been going very well. But where was this one?
Yeah, I haven't tried anything but phone pads, or phone apps. But that's something else I want to do, is try and work on an iPad one, and just see how the transfer looks between one platform and one size screen and another.
Yeah, I mean you'll see when this loads in a second. I haven't got very far with it. Oh, not that. Hang on, it's still loading. I don't know if it's still loading data or not. Yeah. So I mean, I've just got it so you can. I haven't even got, it said it was going to be absent, so I haven't even got as far as, I couldn't work out how on this, what they call gallery control on the left, I haven't even managed to work out how I could change the color of the selected record. But you can see that the edit controls on the right are syncing and stuff, and I did have it able to add new records and things, but yeah, can't remember what that button does. It doesn't seem to do anything. Yeah, so it's quite. I find it quite difficult to work it out, but it's a very important bit of software, I think, from Microsoft. Let's face it, they're putting a lot of money into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really interested in playing around with the common data model as it correlates with portions of an Access Web App table, like just certain fields within it.
No, you can't. You can't get any Access Web App fields into the common data model. Not the way it works.
Hmm.
Not at the moment, anyway. How do I get out of this? So that app I just showed was in the. Oh, this is good, isn't it? It's just crashed. I think. That was in the common data model. That one. Okay, so this connection here. Can you actually? You probably can't see anything now, can you? Or
yeah, I can see common data model and
yeah.
Dropbox.
Yeah. So the common data model I used for that app, and why doesn't it let me manage? And it has some bespoke entities in it, so it's got absences and absence days, which I haven't managed to get that far yet. And it's a typical way of creating a data table, obviously, with different types of fields and stuff. Exactly what you'd expect, really. They seem to call lookup tables enumerations for some reason. Yeah, I haven't fully got scripts with it, but that's it. Okay, so I'll hand back to you, Andy.
Yeah, that's great.
There we go.
All right, my screen should be back. All right, let me go back to the conversation. So Charles is saying, so after you set up the layout, the next step is creating the connection. Actually, I create the connection first, and then create the layout is kind of auto-built on that connection. I believe you do have the ability to start with a blank layout, and as you add fields to the form, it's automatically creating the data set behind the scenes, but I have not played with that. Judy, you make the connection first, so you have the fields to lay out. Yeah, okay. I guess I should read all these first. Charles, can you show how to connect CDM to the data? I have not done that yet, and it sounds like from what Julian is saying, we might not be able to connect the CDM directly to the Access Web App data, so I'm going to have to play around with that offline and take a look. Jack has
you can connect a web app to CDM and an Access Web App at the same time if you want to, but you can't connect CDM to an Access Web App. You connect the Power App to access Web App.
Yeah, and I believe either you can now or that you will in the future be able to create a CDM based on pieces of a either like a SharePoint list or SQL Azure or things like that.
Yeah, I think it's coming, yeah.
Okay, and yeah, so Jack just shared that he's got a document from a recent presentation, and actually while he's doing that, I'll go ahead and show you. I've got if you go to YouTube, if I could type, and you put in Ignite PowerApps, there are several good presentations. This one here, Build Business Applications with PowerApps, Microsoft Flow, Build PowerApps for Office 365, dive into the Microsoft Common Data Model, dive into PowerApps, building apps. Actually, probably that's the one that I would start with, would be something like that. But there's some really good presentations on YouTube. Just search for Ignite and PowerApps, and you'll be able to find those. Thanks for sharing that, Jack. If we use CDM, it uses its own data set. Yeah, so CDM, again, it's got some standard entities that are already built, and then you can create your own custom ones as well. The concern I have, and I think a lot of people do, is if you are working on something and there are fields that don't belong that aren't in a CDM yet, and you're adding your own fields, and then later on Microsoft decides that these are fields that are now standard. How do you handle that within your application? Do you have to map them to new fields, or how is that going to work? So I think that's a question that's kind of out there as well. Good questions. So has this been beneficial, learning about PowerApps? All right, good. Good. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Please try things out. If you come up with something cool, please email me, and I'll share it with the group. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I'll forward those to Julian. All right, Julian is sharing. I think this is the way forward in the Microsoft world for what they call declarative programming.
I mean, at least this platform is going to allow some true expandability, because you can now, will be with the Power Apps and Flow, be able to consume APIs that you write and publish on your Azure services.
Right. Yeah, I think that's going to be huge, because right now with Access Web Apps, you're tied to just what the macros can do. And I've never written an API, but I think that that's going to be powerful to be able to do. I'm definitely going to have to learn how, because you can really expand your capabilities that way. And then, and that's kind of what they're talking about with flow, is if if you create a flow, whether it's a programmer, IT department, whatever, then they can make those available to the end users, and to be able to use within things that they create on their own.